My guest today is Graham Pitt. And if you enjoy esports, you might be interested to find out that Graham not only cut his teeth on this industry, but also greatly contributed to what it is today. His journey started about 20 years ago when there was no professional scene to speak of, but rather a bunch of people who loved games and loved doing it competitively. Throughout his career, he has been planning, managing, and running various pro competitions, including the ESL Pro Series UK, ESL Major Series, and the European Nation Championship. Today, he's the head of esports operations at North. What does that mean? What does he actually do now? Tune in to learn more about Graham, his story, and the development of esports over the years. I'm Katarzyna Dąbrowska, and it's simple, you know? Joining me today is Graham Pitt, Head of Esports Operations for the esports team North. Thanks so much for being here, Graham.
Thank you for having me.
Tell me something. This is like my first question that I ask everybody. What exactly does a Head of Esport Operations do?
I think that can vary between organizations. I've had the same title in both a tournament organizer as well as a team, an esports team. So it can vary a lot, but I see it as kind of the backbone of the sort of organization behind, let's say, the team or the tournament. So in the current team now, I handle all of the logistical issues. Obviously, this year, COVID, there hasn't been that many logistical issues. But typically, I would handle all the travel, all the tournament all the communication with the tournament organizers, any coordination behind the scenes for that kind of stuff. Administrative wise, it depends on, again, the role you have within an organization, but sometimes, and in my case, that extends to transfer negotiations, contract negotiations with the players, general like integration. If we hire a foreign player and they come to live in Copenhagen, how do they register, all that kind of stuff. I see it as kind of like a pivot point between all the different branches of an organization. So, when the content team wants to record some content, then they can come to me. I can handle the schedule, work with the head coach or the manager of a certain team or roster within the organization to make sure that communication happens. Same for, partner activations. All those kind of things sort of come through that sort of central point. So it's kind of the I guess the fulcrum of an organization in a way, because
what a word.
Yeah, what a word. Everything can kind of flow through you, and you can kind of keep everything under control, and I think it's quite a valuable position to have.
So it's like a jack of all trades. You do a little bit of everything.
Yeah, I guess so, yeah.
And what did your journey look like to get to the place that you're at now?
I think, somewhere in the early 2000s, I would say. I was a player. I used to play Call of Duty. I was above average, but not great. So, I had my moments, but I was never going to be a top player. And certainly back then, being a sub-top player in a sub-top esport at the time it was, there was no livelihood to be made. So it was just a fun thing. And, it was enjoyable, but I decided that my community was having some issues. The tournaments were dying out, and people weren't stepping up to operate these tournaments. So I decided that I would do that.
Okay, because this was like in the early 2000s and there was no money, so people were like, fuck it, we don't really want to deal with this.
Yeah, exactly. So I started off with a now defunct organization, but back then they were the place to be. Clanbase, a company called Clanbase.
Clanbase.
I ran ladders and leagues and cups for Call of Duty back then. And then I moved over to where I spent a lot of my time, which was ESL. Back then, they were known as the Electronic Sports League, but nowadays they're just ESL. And again, at that point, I switched over purely to running UK tournaments. So I worked across multiple different game titles under the sort of the ESL UK banner, and I think within a few months, I was the head volunteer, let's say. Again, this is in 2009, I think. So it's still a very long time ago, and these days people say that you should get paid for the work you do. Back then, that didn't exist. There was only a very few amount of people back then that could make a full-time living out of esports. So thankfully, that has changed a lot in the last decade. But back then, I was just at university, and I would do sort of freelance and contract work for ESL, building up the UK side of their business. And then what happened after that? I think it was in 2012. I finished my university, and I needed a job. So I asked ESL if they had a job, and unfortunately at that time they didn't. So I went to Multiplay. Nowadays they're known as Belong or Game. They've had a few takeovers in the time, but they ran the UK's biggest gaming festival. It's a big LAN festival.
Okay. Like a LAN festival where people still brought their computers?
Yeah. And I used to go there three times a year with all my friends. There'll be like 7, 8, 9 of us sometimes playing games for 5 days. It was a very unhealthy lifestyle, but it was the highlights of our years for sure.
Well, this is like me when a new game is out. I'm out for a month or 2. Yeah.
Indeed. So at that point, I was also volunteering for them as well. So I got free entry to the event and free sleeping accommodations in return for running tournaments for them. So they actually had an opportunity for me to join their full-time team. So I worked for them for, I think it was about 9 months between 2012 and 2013, running tournaments at their LAN event, like white label, like one-off things that they did with the partners. And then ESL came back knocking. And so I took a job with them. I picked up my life. I moved to Germany from the UK. And I spent 3.5 years there working on some of the biggest tournaments that there is. I worked 5 CSGO majors. I did 3 StarCraft 2 World Championships at BlizzCon, a Dota 2 major. I think I did a Hearthstone EU Championship once. That was a very fun event. I worked on everything and anything, but my main focuses were StarCraft and Counter-Strike. So I was basically the kind of go-to guy for those 2 games for 3.5 years while I was there. And then I moved to Denmark, to Copenhagen in the end of 2016. I wanted a change in my life, and one of the teams that I worked with in Counter-Strike said that they were looking to expand their operations, and they wanted to delve into to other areas of esports business, and one of them was tournaments. So they came to me and said, "Are you interested?" And I said, "Yeah, I'll hear it out." And at that point, that was when Refresh as a company was born, which I guess was split into two elements of the business. There was the tournament side, which I guess people now know as Blast. So what was Blast Pro Series and is now Blast Premier, and they do Valorant as well and all kinds of things now.
Okay.
And the other side of it was the esports teams that they had. They were 4 specifically CSGO teams. They had Norse at the time, which was a Norwegian team. They had Godsent, which was a Swedish team. And then they had 2 Danish teams. One was Heroic, and the other one, which I guess is the best known, would be Astralis. This was where I kind of got into the team operations side of things. I'd been used to running tournaments from the tournaments perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And I continued to do that while under the Refresh banner, working on the Blast and launching the Blast events through 2017 to 2019. And then there was just an opportunity. There was no one kind of taking care of a lot of the stuff on the team side of things, specifically with Heroic and Godsent. So I just started managing their day-to-day operations, handling all the communications with the tournament on behalf of the organization. And I fell in love with it, I guess. It was exciting. It was different. It was new, and I felt like I could make quite a big difference to these players. To get them the treatment and the feeling of that they're being taken care of, and that was nice for me. So I continued doing that up until the point where I saw an opportunity to come to North and sort of take a more specific and senior role over an entire organization, that has multiple games. We have a FIFA team and an Apex Legends team alongside Counter-Strike. So I saw that as an opportunity to kind of move upwards and take more responsibility over sort of the entire organization. And that's where I am now, a year later.
Okay. And do you feel that with esports being, okay, I don't want to say new because it's not new. To a lot of people, it's new. But I feel like esports, when I say new, it's like we don't have a playbook for esports.
No.
And so do you feel that for a lot of people, taking initiative, if they want to, work in this field, that's kind of the ticket? It's like looking at a place where something can be done and just doing it?
I definitely think so. I mean, I'll be entirely honest. A lot of the opportunities that I've had have been through sort of being in the right place at the right time and having
Yeah.
the right talks with the right people. There's definitely a lot of that. It's very rare that I've applied for a role. Typically, the people come to me because they know who I am, and I guess that's because of the fact that I've put myself out there a lot, and I spent 6 years or something working for free. So I think I built up a bit of a reputation as someone who worked hard and did a good job, and I credit that as to where I am now, because without that kind of kickstart, I wouldn't be here.
Okay.
I think the esports industry has changed dramatically in those years. These days, I think having qualifications, degrees, especially in certain aspects of the esports business, is almost a necessity.
Okay. You think so? You think that now it's such an industry that in order to be successful in it, study at a university level is something that is required?
Yeah, I mean, there are definitely certain aspects of the business that require it. If you want to go into marketing with an esports company, you probably need some formal education in marketing. Obviously, there will always be aspects of marketing towards a specific audience that having esports experience or gaming experience will heavily help that. But I think these days, if you're applying for roles at sort of some of the bigger teams and tournaments and companies, you need to have some level of experience, and some of that can be endemic experience, something that you've built up over time from working in these companies. And maybe you don't always need a formal education in something, but I think that's something that's definitely changed. I think these days people look more towards a formal education a lot of the time, rather than sort of experience in the industry. It's something that's changed, but it's not something that's like a written rule. There's definitely positions like mine. I mean, these days, you could look at sports management degrees and say that someone in my position should have some element of a sports management degree or experience in that sense. Obviously, I'm still sort of riding the wave of my experience rather than having a formal education. But I mean, I think when you come to sort of what I used to do with the tournament operations, that you have to learn through doing it. You have to go out and say, like, I want to run esports tournaments. Where can I do that? Where can I get an opportunity to learn how to do that? And then
you're not going to learn that at school. You're just not.
No, exactly. So it'll take you a little while to go through that process, and there are definitely roles within teams and tournaments and all the other sort of aspects of the business that you can take that route, but not in every sense these days. Whereas before, I think it used to be a lot more kind of, I can do that, and you go out and do that, and you get the experience, and then you'd sort of develop yourself into that role. Whereas these days, I think there's a bit more reliance on having a formal education in something.
I want to go back a little bit to your beginnings. Do you remember the first tournament you organized and what it looked like and what it was and when it was?
Ooh, the first the first offline tournament I ran. I mean, the first online tournament I ran would have been just some seasonal cup for Call of Duty in like 2006 or something. That's not too relevant. The first offline event I ran would have been Call of Duty 4 at an event called Insomnia 42 or 43, I think. One of those. I think we had about 50 something teams, and we just played Call of Duty 4 for 4 days, and somebody won. I don't remember.
And somebody won.
I know that at my second event we had to kick out a cheater who was knowingly cheating while playing in a giant LAN hall filled with people who were watching him. And that was an interesting one.
How, I'm a bit ignorant when it comes to shooting games.
Yeah.
How does one cheat at Call of Duty?
So in this particular scenario, he basically just had an aimbot. It was he would put his crosshair sort of randomly kind of aimed at an opponent, and the bullets would just always hit. So he could sort of like just shoot through a smoke, and it would look like he was just shooting normally, but the bullets would go different, and it would just hit everything. And we reviewed the demo, the recording, the replay of what was happening, and it just was so blatantly obvious that I don't understand how he thought he wasn't going to get caught.
Okay, because everything was a hit.
Yeah, exactly. And his crosshair, where he was aiming, would just be nowhere near where these players were, and the bullets would just hit. And it was he admitted it. He completely admitted that he did it, and he actually was quite notorious because he showed up at other events like in the future as well, and it was a very weird situation. But
and so that was his shtick. He
he was just a cheater apparently. Yeah. And I vividly remember there's photos as well that I've seen actually quite recently when I was looking through some older photo albums. I guess I have digital photo albums of him being escorted out by security with looking very sad. And, it was a very weird experience because I just didn't think that anyone would have the sort of the guts to just to do it so blatantly as well.
Yeah, like at least do it in a way that like maybe not every shot that you get, and maybe try to aim somewhere in the general vicinity.
It was very bad, and I think actually the worst thing about it was that actually after we disqualified the team, some of the team left the event, and it was actually brought up afterwards that actually there might have been another player on that same team that was also cheating. But it never actually got investigated properly, so we never actually truly confirmed it. But there was some video recordings that were I don't know that they should have been investigated a bit more. But my role ended when the event ended, so it wasn't something that it wasn't something that was my responsibility to look into anymore. And he never showed up again, so that wasn't something that came up again. But yeah, I think there was actually 2 players on that team that cheated in the end, but only one got caught.
How many people in total were there on these teams?
In this game, it was 5v5, so it was 5 players per team. And back then, we didn't have coaches or substitute players, and it was very basic. So it was just 5 players. Sometimes you would just turn up at the event and just find 4 other guys, dotted around the hall, and you'd just play. It wasn't. Sometimes there was the high end where teams who were signed to big organizations would play, and then there was also teams that would literally just form on the day just to have some fun and play.
Okay. So people just showed up and gotcha. Okay. See, I would be really curious to know, one, whether that team was, a random team full of randos who just met, or were they a team that knew each other and if they knew and all that sort of stuff.
They were definitely a team that knew each other. They were, again, they were kind of known as I don't want to say being a bit dodgy, but there was question marks around them before they came, and which makes it even stupider that they did it. But because if you're under the microscope, you tend to act more. At least most people would tend to act a bit more reserved and perhaps be a bit more cautious. But yeah, it was a very weird experience overall. But
and this was in 2006-ish.
No, I think this must have been 2010 or 11. I think. Through 2010 is what I want to say.
Okay. And so that was the first tournament that you organised, or was this a different tournament?
That was at the second one I ever did, I think.
The second one.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it was the same event. It was the same event, just the second, the second one I did of that.
Yeah, this is the second version of it, or
So I think I must have been 18 or 19, I think, back then. 10 years, something like that.
And what would happen now if somebody was caught doing something like this?
I mean, these days there's a lot more. It depends on which tournament you cheat in, but certainly, I think these days, if it's part of one of the major tournaments, you probably get banned from every single event there is out there at the top level. Certainly, with tournaments like ESL and Blast and DreamHack, they're all part of this overarching, sort of body, which is called ESIC, the Esports Integrity Coalition, I think they're called now.
Okay.
Or might be corporation, I can't remember. They changed their name recently. And they handle all kinds of integrity issues, whether it's from match fixing, just betting on your own games, and also cheating specifically. So in that case, their punishment would be handed down from the overarching sort of punishment body. And I think the maximum ban for like a first offense that's not like grossly horrible is, I think it's 2 years, which I think is very reasonable.
And do they serve out a ban for like all competitions or just some competitions?
Typically, it will be a time length ban, and it will be a ban from all competitions that organizer has. Obviously, with this overarching body, it covers multiple different tournament organizers because they're all agreeing that they will cross apply the bans because they all work with this one entity called ESIC. I think typically it's just a time ban. So they say, you're banned for 6 months, you're banned for 10 months, whatever it is. And they just can't play any tournaments from that organizer. That there are some issues with this thing is that sometimes organizers aren't willing to impose bans from other organizers.
So if something happened at one event, organizers of another event might say, hey, we kind of don't care. Maybe not care, but something like that. Yeah,
it's not so much that they don't care. I think the biggest issue is that they don't have the proof. They don't have the the actual physical evidence that says this person sort of committed that offense. So I know that my old company ESL, they actually had lawsuits against them, where a player who was banned actually tried to sue them for sort of libel and defamation because they claimed that they didn't cheat, and being labeled a cheater, was defaming their character. So obviously they had to defend the ban in a court of law by showing their evidence of how and why and when and everything about how they cheated. So if you're not ESL and you try and enforce that same ban and then you get taken to court, you're then relying on your competitor to give you their evidence to save you, and that's where things get a bit complicated.
Okay.
So overall, I think initiatives like ESIC, this sort of overarching body that can handle integrity, is actually a great idea because it actually allows for fairer punishments to be sort of enforced across a more wide range of organizers, and that's good for everyone, I think.
And this body, are they the ones that are in charge of investigating this kind of thing, or is there someone else in charge of that?
Yeah, so they're typically in charge of investigating. How they go about it can range from hiring external experts, or working with, for example, if it's match fixing, they can work with the betting companies to see the trends in how the gambling went and see if there was any accounts that specifically could be linked back to a player or the player's girlfriend or something. And it depends on the scenario, but certainly they're responsible for investigating and then also sort of handing down the punishment, which is then applied across all the different organizers.
Does it happen often that players throw games? Is that something that is common in the industry?
I want to say no, it's not common. Obviously, you only know what you know. So it happens. It has happened. I mean, the most famous one in Counter-Strike would have been the iBuyPower situation, which happened, I think, in late 2014, early 2015.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, back then, salaries weren't great. For players, it was it was a bit Wild West. The esports salaries that we see today, especially in Counter-Strike, hadn't really blown up. That was sort of they were about 6 months before that, and I don't know how it went down. I didn't look too much into the investigation, but essentially, four players from one team, along with I think a coach and some other sort of third parties, through various different ways, bet against their own team, and then just played out a game that they didn't play very well on purpose. And they were gambling with in-game items, skins. So essentially a virtual currency that they could then cash out into real world value. And the investigation went through the website that facilitated the skin gambling, and they checked through all the different accounts and realized that these people were gambling against themselves. They handed it onto Valve, the publisher and developer of the game, and they handed down a lifetime ban. It seems indefinite.
A lifetime ban.
I think
wow.
Indefinite is the word they're using, which implies that it doesn't. It's not lifetime, so it doesn't. It may end, but it's indefinite. So it's until they say otherwise. I think the other major high profile match fixing scandal was back in, I think it was 2010, which involved some Korean StarCraft players. And I think over in Korea, they take it very seriously.
It's a different gaming world out there.
Yeah, from memory, the government has a board. The government actually has a specific way of managing this. So I think players can go to prison if they do it over there. So it's very serious. And I think the main guy the headline case was a guy called Savior, and he's considered one of the 5 best players of all time in the game. And he threw some games, I think, or helped facilitate it. I can't remember exactly. Again, it's long time ago. But that was a big one. And they actually had another match fixing scandal in, I think it was 2015 or 2016 with some StarCraft 2 players. So same game, but same issue. And I think quite recently there's been some accusations and I think even some punishments have been handed down for some Australian CS:GO players. So it's definitely prevalent. I think it doesn't typically happen at the very top level of the game, because at the top level, these players are paying for so much prize money and their salaries are extremely high that the financial incentive just isn't there. But if you go down to kind of like the tier 2, tier 3 level, where their salaries maybe aren't great, and actually if someone comes in and offers them a few $1,000s to throw one match, you think, well, actually, that's like 2 months' salary, maybe. It can definitely happen a lot easier, and it can go under the radar a lot more in the lower down, and that's where the problem really exists. So obviously the way to fix that is that betting companies have to not offer odds on those kind of matches, because as long as gambling exists, people will try and fix, and it's a greedy world out there. It's capitalism. So
totally.
Yeah, it's rough down there for sure. But I think at the top level of pretty much every esport, I really doubt match fixing is occurring.
Yeah.
The punishments are so strong, and some of these people are household names in their own countries. They get featured in magazines and TV, and imagine throwing that all away for something like that.
It would kind of be like Michael Jordan, throwing a game, and I mean, he was like a really proud athlete.
Yeah, exactly.
He was like not going to let anyone come and fuck his shit up. So I kind of assume that some of these top esport players have a similar competitive mindset.
Absolutely. I think players who get to the very, very top, the reason they're at the top is because they want to win. So the idea of losing, even if it's on purpose for financial gain, is probably very alien to them. And I think, I don't think it happens these days.
Yeah. Tell me, how has organizing tournaments changed from, 12 or so years ago when you were first doing it to now?
Well, I think there's a number of things that have changed, but I think the biggest part of it will be broadcast. Having things actually, back in when I started it, things weren't broadcast. People would hear about the tournament results, but they wouldn't watch the tournament. There was no way. Streaming wasn't really a thing. That it was there, but it wasn't as widespread as it is now. So with broadcast comes schedules. You have viewers, so people want to view things at the time that it's meant to happen. So one of the things that really changed in sort of the tournament operations side is actually managing a schedule and being able to meet that schedule. So things like technical problems had to be not just minimized but completely erased from the equation, because if your broadcast schedule says that the TV goes live at 7:00 and you have to have a match starting at 7:00, then all of a sudden there's a very definitive deadline that things have to happen by. Whereas back in the other day, I think sometimes we could play until 4 or 5 a.m. because things went wrong and players disappeared, and it was a very different sort of world back then. And then obviously things transitioned a lot more into audience. There was a live on in stage audience. I remember one of the very first major events that Counter-Strike ever had was ESL 1 Cologne 2015, and we filled up Germany's largest indoor arena. I think we had 12, maybe 13,000 people in there. I think the capacity total is like 14 and a half when it was laid out the way we had it. So that was huge. And obviously with that comes the same problem. You have these people inside the audience, inside the venue, that want to see the game. They don't want to wait an hour between games. So then it became about not just meeting deadlines, but actually sort of min-maxing everything you can do to make sure that you can reduce the amount of time possible where there's no content. It's the content is the game. They want to watch the game. So yeah, everything basically became about timing. And through timing, obviously protocols improved, the technology improved a lot as well. There was lots of investment into, technology that could improve, setup times, the quality of the game, the quality of the environment, whether it's just having a table that can go up and down easily. Rather than having a table that is static, having chairs that can go up and down, chairs with proper wrist and back support. It's everything sort of around the environment, around the players changed because it had to change. We were also dealing with sort of professionals. But back in the old days, these were amateur players that would turn up and just want to play Counter-Strike for some money. And now
for 4 days.
Yeah, exactly. And now it's about, professional teams who, have expectations, and also it's about presenting, esports, whichever one it is, as a premium kind of product. You don't want to tune in to watch some guy playing in his basement, with in the dark.
No, I can do that by myself.
Exactly. You want to see these guys, well groomed. You want to see them, looking their best. You want to see the stage looking the best. It was all about, how things are perceived to the audience. So everything that basically changed came around with broadcast and audience. And obviously that can lead into multiple different facets, even just from the speed of the setup to the quality of the design and everything.
And how long does a tournament generally go for? I mean, I'm sure it probably also differs with the game that is being played, but can you give me some examples of how it looks like?
I mean, a typical Counter-Strike event will run for 5 to 7 days these days. I know there's been a lot of issues, especially with Counter-Strike, regarding player welfare and how long they travel and how long they're away and how many matches they play per day and what's what's acceptable and what's not. But I mean, obviously COVID has completely changed that, and this year is kind of a write-off in a way, because it's impossible to know.
2020.
Yeah, it was impossible to plan for, and it is what it is. But before that, at least I'd say 5 to 7 days. Sometimes as low as 3 if it's a smaller event can definitely be possible. Obviously relevant to the amount of teams that participate. If you're looking at 16 teams, then you're looking at a longer length event. If you're looking at 8 teams, then maybe you're looking at a shorter event. There are some outliers to that. Typically, it comes when it's like a major or a world championship. I know that Riot and their League of Legends World Championship can take like 5-6 weeks, but they don't play all the time. They do maybe like 3 or 4 days a week, and then they have like 4 days off, and then it takes a long time, and they also changed locations. So I remember they did their World Championships in Europe a few years back, and they did like London, Paris, Madrid, Berlin, or something. They changed different locations throughout the tournament. So yeah, things can range very heavily depending on the game and the organizer and the gravity of the event.
Could we compare like a tournament like this, if we compare it to something like in traditional sports, kind of like a season, in a sense that the players all come to one place, or they travel, like you said, and they have it out, whether it's for 7 to 10 days or whether it's for 5 weeks. They have it out, and during that time, teams obviously get eliminated, and then the best teams stay, and eventually the 2 top teams battle it out. Is it something like this?
I think it varies a lot between the games. I think, for example, League of Legends, we'll stick with that for now. They have a yearly season that's split up into sort of 2 seasons. So they have a spring season and a summer season that then leads into a World Championship. And then they reset for the next year, and they have a spring season and a summer season that leads into a World Championship. So they run on a 1-year cycle that's kind of split in 2 just to give them a break. Counter-Strike is on a 6-month cycle, give or take. We typically have sort of the start of the year and the end of the year, and then there's summer break in the middle and a winter break at the end. So it's very specifically kind of a 6-month period where what I would consider a season, because in between those sort of seasons, there's like transfers, and there's a lot of transfer activity during that period. And typically they also conclude or try and conclude with what we call a CSGO Major Championship. This year, again, bit of a write-off, hasn't been one because they want to run it offline, and we haven't had a chance to run it offline. But typically there would be like one in like May or June and one in November, December. At least that's the plan. So, you kind of build up from January to May or June, have the summer break, then build up from sort of August, September, have a major World Championship in November, and then again, winter break, and then continue. And a lot of the other organizers, like the ESLs and the Blast, they conform to kind of a similar system within their own ecosystems. So ESL have an ESL Pro League during each of those 2 seasons, and they have like a headline Masters event during each of those 2 seasons, and kind of the same thing. So I think each game sort of has its own ecosystem that runs on kind of whatever sort of seasonal format they have. Some are whole years long, but then maybe they have like League of Legends has, which is sort of split into 2 with like a sort of 2 seasons running into like a World Championship, and some just run off like 6-month seasons.
Okay. I wanted to talk a little bit about how teams are, compiled, let's say, because in my head, and I know that this is totally inaccurate, but in my head, I have it like, oh, there's a bunch of friends who really love playing this game, and now they're a team, and now they're super professional and making all this money. And like maybe this was the case, 10, 15 years ago when you were, a bunch of friends having fun and playing games. But I'm pretty sure that's not the way that it's happening now.
I think there's some element of that still exists, but it's not at the top level. You may play on a team like that until sort of you're in the tier 2, tier 3, maybe like in the the next step to going sort of pro, and then that's where the best players will leave that kind of team and go on to sort of progress. If they have the drive and the willingness to be at the very top, they'll leave that kind of team and go onwards. At the very top level, I mean, it doesn't happen in all organizations, but at the very top level, in sort of the top games, you'll have general managers who will be, working with a scouting team and a development team on finding the players that they want to play with that fit the roles and fit the rest of the team. And then there's kind of a midpoint where there's the very top level teams, but the players still sort of decide who they want to play with, but it won't necessarily be based on friendship and it'll be based on who can I win with the best. So there's sort of three sort of levels of teams at this point, and I think we'll see a growing trend towards the organization general manager kind of role and position in the next few years. It's something that's been progressing quite quickly in the last sort of 3 or 4 years, and I think in 5 years or so, every team at the very top level will be based like that, I think.
Okay. And what kind of players do you look for the team? What's important?
I think that depends a lot on where your team is in sort of their life cycle. I mean, right now we've just had a good example. Yesterday, we just transfer listed 2 of our most experienced players because we're looking to take a more youthful and a more a younger approach to the team. We want young players who are coming in with extreme desire, extreme hunger. Players that have maybe 10 years left on their careers to really sort of push the boundaries.
Okay.
So for us, that's what made sense at the time. But I mean, going back a year ago, when I joined North, the team that I joined had no leadership. They were lacking someone to lead the team, to kind of be the face of the team and to push the other guys forward and to bring it all together. So we brought in a leader.
In this case, do you mean like a leader of the team, like let's say the captain, if we're talking about traditional sports, or like more in a manager sense?
In this case, definitely a captain. We're looking for the guy to have influence within the team and to inspire the team. But specifically in Counter-Strike, the captain role.
Do we have a word for this in esports? Like, because in traditional sports, it's captain, the captain of the football team. Do we have this in esports? I've never even heard of this.
So I think there can be a team captain, and that can be like it is in the traditional sense, the traditional sports sense. He's the kind of, maybe he's the guy who's been there the longest. He's the guy that inspires the team. He has the respect of the team. But within esports, because of the nature of the kind of games we have, where, for example, the coaching staff doesn't have input on a game that's ongoing. So typically you'll have, I think in League of Legends, they would call it a shot caller, someone who calls the shots, someone who directs the rest of the team. In Counter-Strike, we call it an in-game leader, someone who calls the strategy at the start of each round, who, keeps track of, what strategies they want to use and directs the team in the game. So it can vary a lot. I know that some teams will have those two roles split. The captain of the team may not be the guy who leads them in game, but he's the guy that outside of the game will be influencing the team a lot and inspiring them and holding the other members accountable perhaps. Whereas the in-game leader will focus on sort of tactics and strategy and directing the team in the game. So I think there's positions for both of those, and sometimes it could be the same person, and sometimes it might be 2 separate people. Compared to a game like football, where the manager can shout instructions from the sideline, and they've obviously they've built their team before the game. Esports typically require a lot of changes mid-game, and that's where the split comes from.
Okay, and you're saying that a year ago at North, this kind of leadership was lacking.
Yeah, we definitely lacked a strong in-game leader specifically. So it was something that was very apparent, both from the coach's perspective, but also from the players' perspective. They all felt that they lacked proper direction in the game, even though they were doing okay. They really felt like they could use more of a strategic and tactical leader within the game. So that's the first thing I did, was find that player.
Okay, and that was like a new, totally new player in the team, or like that was brought into the team, or was that someone that kind of raced through the ranks of the team?
So he was. We paid a transfer fee to another club. He was actually a former player of this team. but left the team in 2018, and we brought him back at the start of 2020. So he was quite well known to the team, and he's quite well known within the community, let's say, as a very sort of structured, tactical in-game leader. So it made sense to bring him back. In an ideal world, we would be in a position where we had, kind of a youth player who you could bring up and bring into that role. Things like academy teams aren't really a thing right now. It's something that's been explored, and it's something that some teams are starting to do.
Can you elaborate a little bit? What does academy teams mean?
I guess you could call it like a youth team in a normal sort of sports example. A football club will have their first team, they'll have their under 23s team, and then they'll have an under 19s and under 17. They'll have their youth players. So they bring players up through the whole organization, and the best ones will make it through to the first team. That hasn't really been a thing in esports that much. It's getting better, a lot better these days. I know that in League of Legends, the top teams are forced to have an academy team. So they're forced to have at least sort of 10 members on the roster, so they can bring in new players, and it's a good place to trial young talent before they're ready for the first team. The biggest thing that stood in the way with Counter-Strike, at least, and academy teams, is that there's rules that a lot of tournaments enforce that say that the academy teams can't participate in the same events as the main team. And that makes having two teams very tough in some cases, because if you can't use the second team to sort of gain experience, then they're not going to develop at the right level. So a lot of clubs are trying to figure out different ways to sort of have maybe an additional single player and use them as a substitute, or to have players elsewhere that they can bring in and have agreements with. And it's an ongoing kind of issue, and no one's really solved it yet. But a lot of teams are doing some really, really good things with it, for sure. So I think that'll be a huge development in the next 2 years. I think maybe less, where a lot more teams start investing in at least having 6 players rather than 5 for their first team, but also developing more ambitions to have maybe a full team of sort of reserve players, maybe young players they're not ready to play at the first team level yet, but can develop into players like that. So I'm very excited for that, because I think it's a huge thing. Not just from sort of being able to replace players when you need to, if it becomes necessary, but also from a perspective of being able to bring a player in to cover for sickness, for something like that.
Well, someone might want to chuck a sickie and not show up, and
exactly, things like that. But also, players can get exhausted. It's very mentally taxing to be a sports athlete at the top level. Where obviously footballers, they physically get drained from having to run 10 kilometers a game. So players get rotated in and out of sports teams all the time. But that's not really very common, or it hasn't been very common in esports. But this year especially, it could be COVID related, but certainly a lot of players have been taking time off. They've just said, I need 2 months off. I need to recharge. I'm just drained, physically drained. And that's happened to a lot of players this year in 2020. And it's really highlighted the fact that there needs to be sort of a backup plan. And whether that's a whole team of backup players, or just a single backup player, or something in between, no one's truly figured it out yet, but they definitely will in the next few years, because it's going to be a necessity.
Why do you think that this year? I mean, it's a bit obvious, but why do you think this year has been so draining for the players? Because I know why this year has been draining for people in general. But players kind of, you could say they kind of had a break in the sense that they were not traveling and all of that. So why do you think this year has been such a challenge for them?
Yeah, so I actually think this year has been more challenging from a schedule perspective than it was in the past. because you don't have to travel, you think, oh yeah, you get all those days back. But the problem is that tournaments spread themselves out over bigger periods of time. So it sounds kind of silly, I guess you could say. But one tournament we played earlier in the year had 7 matches spread out over I think it was 16 days, which doesn't sound like that much. But when you have a match one day, and then you have a break day, and then you have another match, and then you have a break day, and then maybe you have 2 matches, and then maybe you have 2 break days and another match, where are you supposed to take time off? Because it's not a break day. It's like, okay, we've played the game yesterday. Now it's today, and we have another match tomorrow. What do we have to do? We have to prepare for that match. So then you spend, that day, practicing, maybe specific tactics or specific maps or researching that next opponent. So when are you supposed to take a break day? Even if you get 2 days off, maybe you take the first day off, you still have to do the second day. It's not even a usual, most people work a 9 to 5, Monday to Friday kind of role, right? A job. So they get 2 days off every weekend to kind of recharge, but it didn't happen. So
here it's like they've got 16 days in a row practically of just working and being in the zone.
And then when you do that, and then that's just the group stage. So then there's another week after that where there's the playoffs, which can be even more taxing. It can be maybe 4 games in 4 days where you get no time. Yeah. And then okay, cool. The grand final is on Sunday. You just finish, and then the next tournament starts on Monday or Tuesday. The first half of this year was horrendously scheduled from all the different tournament organizers, specifically in Counter-Strike. I'm only talking Counter-Strike here because it didn't happen, as far as I'm aware, in any other esports game. But Counter-Strike has a big problem in the fact that there's so many different tournament organizers competing for the same product, essentially. They're competing to be number one. So they all want to have all the best teams playing at all the best times, and that just meant that it was just back to back to back to back to back non-stop matches. Yeah. And maybe you skipped a tournament here or there, but having 1 week off, even if it's a week off from matches, you probably still have a tournament in another week. So you still have to prepare and keep up for that. It was just so relentless that I'm absolutely not shocked that this year provided so many players going down with exhaustion or sickness or just stress. It was really tough. It was really, really tough.
Okay. The tough year.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I've just looked at the time and I realize we're practically out of it. So I'm going to finish off with 2 of my favorite questions that I kind of ask everybody. The first question is, what advice would you give to somebody who would like to have a career in esports, whether it's a player or, or someone just working behind the scenes?
I feel like that's a question that I don't say it gets asked a lot, but it's a question that a lot of people who are in that position ask. They say what would you say for me if I wanted to get into esports?
Yeah, I love being original. Yeah. That's my thing,
I would say that, find out what you enjoy doing and do it. Because
simple.
Try different things if you want to, but if you say I want to run tournaments, I want to be the person who's standing up there with the players, fixing their problems and helping this whole sort of, you want to feel like a super important cog in a giant watch. Every little cog is important in a watch because without one of them, they don't work. And just find out what you want to do that you enjoy, because esports can be a very tough world, I think. The landscape changes very quickly year to year, and you want to find yourself doing something that you enjoy. Everyone wants to do something they enjoy, for their career, right? So don't put yourself in a position from the start where you're not doing something you enjoy, because if you don't enjoy it, you're not going to push yourself. You're not going to see the benefits of going to work or waking up every day to log on if it's remote. Just find something that you enjoy and learn about it. Get experience. Talk to people in the field and find out what it is that makes someone good at that role, And I promise you, you will find somewhere. These days, things can be quite tough in esports because it's very geographically challenged in some ways, because a lot more teams these days and tournaments and a lot more roles these days are in a city. They're in an office. Maybe COVID changes that, but just find something that you enjoy and find somewhere where you can do it and gain experience. And if you're good at it, you will go somewhere for sure.
That's some solid, simple advice, I think. And my last question is, what advice would you give to your younger self?
What advice would I give to my younger self?
Yeah.
What advice? I mean,
if any. I mean, maybe you did everything perfectly. I don't know.
No, I definitely didn't do everything perfectly. I think there's a joke answer to this, and there's a real answer to this.
Okay, hit me with both.
The joke answer is I should have paid a lot more attention during my German class in school, because I was sitting there like,
said no one ever.
Yeah, why do I need to learn these stupid languages? French and German. They're not going to be any use to me. I speak English. Everyone speaks English. Very arrogant British thing to say. And obviously, then 5 years later, I find myself living in
Germany,
and thinking, this wasn't very well thought through. And I'm sort of I'm remembering like the tiny bits of German that I'd remembered, and I was just like, this was I should have really paid more attention. Like, there was no reason not to. But then the offside of that is, or the flip side of that is, I probably spent that time not revising German, running tournaments for free and putting my time into that. So, the question of if I'd been more into my studies, perhaps I wouldn't have gained the experience I needed to be where I am. So I don't take that as a as a serious thing necessarily, but certainly it was kind of ironic moving to Germany and thinking about my attitude in the past and just thinking, probably should have paid more attention in German class. And then
so what's the serious one?
I think the serious one would be, I think for me, it's like I would call myself, I'm an introvert. I am introverted. I struggle to kind of put myself out there with people. And I think the main thing I would tell myself is it's okay. Just like something, I think I gained a lot more confidence over especially the last few years, maybe like 3 to 4 years. Confidence that I can go out and be myself, and that social situations for myself will be fine. You just have to sort of trust in the process and trust that everything will be all right. Because I think definitely, on a personal development standpoint, I sort of withheld myself, and I kept myself very, very much to myself, and didn't want to mingle and be social. And I think I lost a lot out of the enjoyment I could have had with other people back then. So if anyone finds themselves in kind of a similar position to that, where they're kind of hesitant about sort of going out there into the world with other people, just do it. Like, what's the worst that can happen? Like, that's the way I'm trying to think about it now, and I definitely feel like I'm a lot happier now with the situation. So I feel like it's a lot easier to make friends and to sort of put a smile on my own face. If that makes sense. I get a lot of pride out of kind of saying, like, 5 years ago I wouldn't have done that, but today I did that. It's kind of a self-development goal of mine, and I definitely think it held me back a lot in the past. So that's what I would tell myself for sure.
Okay, that's some solid advice.
Yeah.
That's solid. Okay, listen, thank you so much for your time today and for all your insights. I really enjoyed it, and I didn't even touch on like half the topics that I wanted to. So thank you so much.
No, thank you very much. It was very enjoyable. I had a very good hard think about a lot of things that I'd somewhat forgotten. So it was a very nice sort of trip down memory lane, so to speak. Thank you very much.
Oh, well, I'm really glad I could take you down that little trip. It was really fun for me too. Thanks.